Making sure my voice is still on before I start talking. How are you, everybody? And welcome to episode 114 of the Game Changers. I am your host, Carla, and tonight I'm unlocking the mindset, strategy, and purpose behind the game. This is where fantasy football meets real life grit and where every story brings something you can feel. Shout out to the TSA team for powering this mission and to every listener who shows up for these conversations. If you're ready for insight, inspiration, and energy, you are in the right place. Let's get into it. Tonight, I have a real game changer. I am sitting down with one of the most respected voices in the fantasy football media, Eric Balkman. Eric is a 28 award winning radio and television broadcast professional and the longtime co host and producer of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the longest running podcast dedicated to high stakes fantasy football. He is also the creator behind multiple spin offs and insider shows, including the RotoViz, a high stakes lowdown, FFPC Insider Access, and Extra Reps. Beyond podcasting, Eric has spent really 2 decades as a talent and content producer for the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the largest season long fantasy contest operator in the world. He's interviewed everyone from pro athletes to musicians to TV personalities and even won 135K grand prize in a national fantasy football contest. He is a storyteller, a strategist, and a true student of the game, someone who's helped shape the fantasy football landscape through media, insight, and community. Please help me welcome the incredible Eric Balkman. Eric, how are you tonight?
Doing good. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Carla. A wonderful introduction that I may have had a hand in helping you write. But yeah, it was fantastic. You made me sound a lot more important than I actually am, which was awesome.
You are. This is such an honor to have you tonight on the show. Thank you so much for being here. So, Eric, let's start. What first pulled you into broadcasting?
Great question. I think when I was growing up, it's so this is such a horrible answer to this question, but growing up, I felt like I always kind of wanted, like I would listen to sports talk radio and I always wanted to have my own sports talk radio show. And then when I went to college, I originally was just going to be a journalism, like a print journalism major. And then as I'm, sort of matriculating through the classes and the curriculum, I'm kind of finding out that, as long as I'm here, I should probably get some broadcast stuff and experience under my belt with radio and television as well. So then into that journalism major, I added a radio, TV, film major as well. And part of the curriculum for that was you'd have to do different radio shows. So I hosted like a top 40 show. I hosted a jazz show, a blues show. I had a sports talk show, a regular talk show, a news talk show. And one of the ones I was most excited about was sports talk. And Carla, I'm not lying when I tell you this. After I did maybe a week's worth, maybe even less than a week's worth of shows, I said to myself, I don't want to ever do this. This is awful.
Wow.
Talking about sports, this is awful. I don't enjoy this. I don't get anything out of it. And I kind of pivoted away from that a little bit. And I would call games, like obviously in college we were calling football games, basketball games, baseball, softball, volleyball, stuff like that. And there was some enjoyment in that. There was more. I felt like it was more purposeful doing that than just talking about sports. And I actually did have my own sports talk show here in Northeast Wisconsin on the radio for almost a decade, a little under a decade. I recently left that because of a promotion at one of my other gigs, so I couldn't keep doing it. But with fantasy football, which is pretty much all of my shows except for my movie podcast that I do, I do feel like you're actually doing something where I'm either offering advice on what I think about player evaluation, draft strategy, or more importantly, when I bring on people, other high stakes fantasy football players onto the show who not only are doing the same thing, but are very successful at it. $1 million grand prize winners, people who have been to the mountaintop. That's And I feel like having those people on and giving them a voice in an industry that's sort of overrun with voices, because there's just a mountain of content out there, be it print or the internet or podcasting or YouTube or X or whatever. There's so much out there right now. And I think a lot of the high stakes players kind of get underexposed to that. And I think, like, what drew me in to broadcasting originally was just being able to talk about sports for a living. And now I've kind of pivoted off that. What gets the juices going and why I like it so much is not only learning myself, but giving an avenue for people who don't really have the avenue to talk about what makes them successful. I think that's the best part of the gig right now. So it's totally, what I'm doing right now is not the reason I originally got into broadcasting, for sure.
What made you fall in like with storytelling and podcasting?
Well, I mean, everybody loves a
Talking
good
about
story.
all of this.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, everybody loves a good story, whether it's a book or a movie or a television show or anything like that, or like a podcast or whatever. Everybody loves falling into a good story. I think the whole reason it's more true now than ever. With the world we live in, we're always trying to escape for an hour or two out of our lives to dip into something else that's not reality, that we can let our brain relax and enjoy, something that's unfolding in front of us that's really entertaining. And the trick is to how to make that entertaining for people, that they want to come back for more, because they really enjoy it. And I don't think necessarily that I don't necessarily consider myself a storyteller. I guess you could say I am, but I think mostly I'm just sort of like, I'm the library, right, where people are coming to rent out the whatever books we have in there.
Yes.
And it's not my story, it's other people's stories. And I think that's what's cool, is like, you just kind of guide the story where you think it has to go, as far as maximum entertainment for anybody who's consuming the content. And I think there's a certain fulfillment that you get out of that.
What's the biggest difference between radio and podcasting, Eric, for you?
Um, I think podcasting it's definitely more free flowing, right? Like when I would do radio, you're always up against a break. You can never really get into something, because you'd always, you'd have like an 8, 9, 10-minute segment, and then you'd have to take a 4-minute break for ads or what have you. And it just totally kills the momentum of what you had going. With podcasting, it's kind of like, you just go for as long as the conversation resolves itself on its own momentum, and you don't have to worry about just this unnatural stoppage, right? And I understand there's ads that go into podcasts or whatever, but I mean, I don't place them in there. I let other people do that. So
Yes.
for me, I think that's the best part about it, is you're totally focused on the conversation, which is what you should want to be focused on, whether you're talking or whether you're listening or whether you're observing. You want to be focused on the conversation. Radio, you don't always get a chance to do that. The other great thing about podcasting too is the reach, right? You're not as targeted as like local radio, or even like Sirius, satellite radio. You're not as targeted as far as who your listeners are. When you're podcasting and you're streaming out to YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, anybody can listen to that. Like there's no restriction on that. So I think that's another thing that's definitely different with podcasting. You never know who's listening, regardless if it's
Yeah.
radio or
True.
podcast. But I think with podcasting, it's definitely more true. Looking at some of the downloads and streams that some of my podcasts get, I mean, we get it's weird. India is a big one for me. I don't know why I'm reaching. I mean, I don't talk about cricket or anything like that, but apparently people over in India are digging fantasy football. And you just never know who's listening. And it's really cool to have that sort of like connectivity, even though you're a world away.
Bring some from India to me, Eric.
I will
Would
definitely
love.
recommend. Yeah, give you a shout out for sure.
I want to shout out to everybody saying happy birthday to me. So I was born on St. Patrick's Day, and that's why I'm wearing like the birthday queen today. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I'm still celebrating. I just turned 48. So thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate that. Going back, Eric, we both know like doing the podcast and everything, it needs always to be fresh,
Mhm.
right? What keeps the show fresh after so many years? And what keeps you going and you want to do more?
Freshening up is always difficult, because I feel like within the first couple of years of doing the high stakes fantasy football hour, we kind of hit a groove, and we found something that people really like. And I'm always looking for new ways to freshen it up. In fact, what we did recently, 3 weeks or so ago, we used to go live on Fridays. And because of my co-host Farrell Elliott, his kind of schedule gets hectic on the weekends. We now have our live show on Wednesdays, but we still do a recorded show on Fridays. So which is kind of different, as far as creating it. Now, as far as consuming it, like no big deal. Like it's kind of the same thing. But I don't know. I just feel like when you cover something like the National Football League, and especially high stakes fantasy football, one of the great things and the maddening things about playing, not even high stakes, just fantasy football in general, is just it always seems like every time you get a handle on it and you know how to draft and you know how to build your team and you know how to manage your team and you know how things are going to go, just when you think you understand the game, then things change and they take a diversion off the path that you think it was on. The NFL is
Yes.
constantly reinventing itself. So at the same time, do I really need to reinvent the show? Do we really need to reinvent the show? Probably not, because the content is always changing, right? The strategy
True.
is always changing. The players are always changing. Even the guests we have on, they change. People I had on 12 years ago, some of them don't play anymore. People that I have
True.
on now 12 years ago were not even in their 20s. They were teenagers, right? So I just think that the cast of characters, hopefully, is enough to keep things fresh. And I think the people that listen and watch and stream the show like the idea of not living in their own echo chamber. They like the idea of challenging themselves to listen and really analyze other people's viewpoints on certain things in fantasy football. And once you can do that, I think you just become a better player. You become better at your craft when
True.
you're not necessarily following the blind advice of people that disagree with you, but I think understanding different viewpoints other than your own, you can't help but become better after that, which is one of the great things about the show. I have on plenty
Yes.
of people that I don't always agree with, but looking at things from their viewpoint, looking at things of how they're coming at it and building their teams, I think has definitely made me a much better player than I was 15 years ago.
I love that. I love that you're talking, about not sometimes not having the same stuff with others, and this is how you build yourself up as well.
Mhm.
And this is what makes us a really good host too, right? So, tell me, how did the idea for a high stakes fantasy football hour originally came together?
Yeah, this is
And
this is a fun story, Carla. I'll stop you right there, and then and because I think this is one big answer. Um, so
I love big answers.
yeah, there you go. So back in 2012, I was a non-traditional college student. I joined the workforce for almost a full decade, and then I went back to school. So I graduated in 2012, and at the time I was, God, how old would I have been then? I would have been 31. I would have been 32. I would have been 32. And the Fantasy Football Players Championship, a company that I was already working for, podcasts were starting to come really into vogue with a lot of websites and content producers,
Yes.
draft sharks, football guys, fantasy pros, what have you. And the FFPC did not really have a show. And so once I had graduated and everything was behind me, I was looking for a gig. I was not looking for a permanent gig with the FFPC. I was looking for a permanent gig, preferably with a radio station. And while I was looking, one of the co-founders of the FFPC, Dave Gerzak, who also happened to be my boss at another gig, said, "Hey, why don't you, just do FFPC stuff? We got work for you here while you're looking." And then he said a couple of weeks after I graduated, he's like, "Hey, we're doing a podcast, and you're going to be the host, and you're going to be the producer, and you're going to book all these guests, and I'm going to co-host with you." And I said, and I kind of didn't think he was serious, but then there was, I think it was a random Wednesday. He said, "I want you to get a Facebook a page going and a Twitter account going. We're going live for our first show this Friday." So I'm like 48 hours.
Wow.
We're doing a show. And so I threw it all together and we did a show that week. And he just basically, so like in less than a week, we threw together, I don't think we had theme music or intros or outros or anything like that yet, but we had a guest and we had banter and we had a podcasting website and we had a way to distribute it to Apple Podcasts or whatever it was called at the time, iTunes, or I can't even remember. And then ever since then, every week, we've done shows. So the idea was it wasn't necessarily mine. I always thought I might have mentioned it to Dave, like, "Hey, it'd be cool if we had this." I never really thought he'd put me like behind the mic for it. But then he just made the command decision. You're doing this, and going forward, we're always going to have a podcast for FFPC. And lo and behold, we have ever since then. So it wasn't even my idea, but I became the instrument of which it flowed.
That's interesting though. I love that. That's really original and interesting. Um, but what made you like want to focus specifically on high stakes fantasy and not something else?
I think that well, number one, I played fantasy football. I started playing in it was either 1993 or 1994. I can't remember which year. So at the time that this podcast started, I was already listening and I was already reading and I was already engrossed in it because I love fantasy sports. And I was playing fantasy baseball, fantasy basketball back then as well. But football was always my favorite, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just think like it was ritualistic for me to, Wednesday you're putting in waivers and you're trying to make all your teams better. You get Thursday night football, so you're setting your lineups on Thursdays, and then Sunday morning setting your lineups, and then watching all the games on Sunday night, and then Monday night, and always shooting for this big grand prize or shooting for championships or what have you. I think that it was always part of like who I was and what I loved to do. Basically since high school. And so for me to have the opportunity, Scott, I always bring this up. Scott Pianowski from Yahoo has done one of my shows before. And I mentioned to him one time about how much he must be getting burned out because there was a crossover because he does all the sports. And there was a crossover where baseball season was meeting football season and everything. I said, "Well, you must be just completely overworked and severely sleep deprived right now." And he just kind of brushed it off and he said, "Nobody wants to hear that. You and I, we work in the toy department.
Oh
No,
my.
we can't complain because everybody wants to do what we do." And I think that drives me too when I think about, okay, well, like think of all the things I could do for work. But I do have this opportunity in front of me where I can, host several shows during the week, bringing on people who are really, really talented at
Yeah.
fantasy football, something I want to strive to be better at, and I get paid for it. I mean, this is just, it's just like everything you would want. So why wouldn't I want to do that given how much I love the game and then getting, I'm kind of getting paid to get better at it too, through the conversations I have with players.
So, what's the biggest lesson you've learned from interviewing high stakes players? And what's the most surprising thing about the high stakes community?
The first part I would say is checking my ego and not tuning out somebody immediately after, I read a post on X, or I read a headline for an email, or I see a title for a podcast, and immediately normally I would just dismiss it. I'm like, well, this is ridiculous. Why would I ever listen this, consume this or whatever? Because it didn't match up with what I already believed. Well,
Wow.
if you do everything the same way based on your thoughts alone and based on your experience alone, I don't know how far that's going to take you. And so for me, the biggest thing I've learned over the years is no matter how much you think somebody's wrong, you got to hear them out. You got to give them a chance to explain their viewpoint, to explain why they feel this way about whatever it is. And then you can make your decision. And I think for the longest time, for the better part of a decade, for sure, maybe even more than a decade, I would just tune that out. I just say this is ridiculous. And then come the end of the season or come, a few months later, like, whoa, gee, that person I said 100 times out of 100 was wrong was actually right here. Maybe I should stop, immediately tuning people out that I don't agree with and actually listen and read and see what they have to say. So that's the biggest thing I've learned. I think the biggest
Love that.
surprising thing that people don't know or don't realize about the high stakes fantasy football industry is how tiny the step is from playing in your home league or your office league or your family league to competing with all these people for $1 million grand prizes with the FFPC. It's really not that big of a leap. You'd like to think, and I think a lot of people are intimidated by plunking down a few hundred or a couple $1,000s of their own money to win a 7-figure grand prize because they think, well, this person knows so much more about it than me. I don't have a shot. And then we see people year after year with one entry winning $1 million, with one entry winning $500,000. People who, you would never expect that aren't crunching the numbers, you think with like DFS where you have all these algorithms and what have you, you really don't have that in season-long fantasy football. So there's this variance that happens. And people who you would never think would win all the time, right? So I think
Yes.
the biggest misconception people have is you have to be this heavy hitter. It's a full-time job to study and read up and do all this stuff to make sure that you are doing your best to compete with the best of the best. And you really don't have to do that. I mean, it is, yeah, I mean, you want to pay attention and set lineups and research, but you're probably what you have to do to succeed to win a 7-figure grand prize in the FFPC, you're probably already doing that stuff already. You know what I mean? You're probably
True.
already doing what it takes to win. It's just a matter of the ball bouncing your way. And I think that's the thing that probably is the biggest hang up with people when they consider high stakes, what high stakes fantasy football is.
I love that perspective. Thank you so much for sharing that. What's one thing every new podcaster should know, in your opinion, Eric? Especially the people that's starting their own shows now.
Patience is probably the biggest thing. Building an audience, it doesn't always, but and definitely in my experience, it is. It
Yes,
takes time to build it. Now you could stumble upon something and all of a sudden have 10,000 YouTube subscribers in a month or two or whatever. That rarely happens.
true.
I think the thing that you have to understand is being patient, that this kind of exposure and audience, it does not build itself overnight or even the course of a few weeks or a few months or sometimes even a few years. I think everybody should, if you're getting into podcasting, one, the first question you should ask is, why would anybody watch this? Why would anybody listen to this? What am I providing that's going to be entertaining? And two, is there somebody already doing what I want to do? Right.
Yes,
And I think if you can find something that's entertaining and that's not already being produced, you might have something. I think back to when we started the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour in 2012. Well, there's a bunch of fantasy football podcasts out there. What was our slant? How are we going to set ourselves apart? Well, why not bring on high stakes fantasy football players to talk about player evaluations and draft strategies and waiver wire management? Like, nobody's doing that. I should say nobody was doing that, but hardly anybody was doing that.
true.
So that was
Agree.
our slant. So I think you got to kind of find what makes you unique, and then just really lean into that, and drive that home, so that if anybody's ever looking for what you're doing, God, I wish there was a podcast about, cats that are pets of Olympic athletes or something like that. There's a
Nice.
story there, and there might be something there. And if nobody's doing that, then there's something there. And then it's all how you tell the story, production value that goes into it, or what have you. But that you can learn, that you can build up, that you can get better at over the course of however long you're doing it. But what you have
Agree.
to have is you got to have something unique, and you got to have something entertaining. That's and if the answer is no to either one of those questions, you need to reevaluate.
True. True. So I have James asking you a question, Eric. For the high stakes, on average, how many entries do you enter?
All right. So for me, personally, I am probably in I don't know, 30 to 40 leagues every year, right around there. And the stakes I play, so I'm an employee of the FFPC, so I can't play in FFPC. I play in the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, KFFSC. That's probably where the majority of my high stakes is. And that's probably, I don't know, on average between $300 and $350 a team. Now, some
Wow.
of those teams I own with other people, where we buy a bunch of teams and we share you invest so much and then you take out so much for the winnings, depending upon how much you invest in. And so, like, some of the teams I run and manage are also technically owned by some of my other friends, right? The team investment is like 30 to 40. The monetary investment is not. I mean, it's less than what it would cost for 30 to 40 of those. And then some of those teams, probably like a dozen of them, are just like private leagues with like friends or whatever. And those usually right around the same price point, 250 to $300.
James is so like surprised and like he's all over the place. But I hope we answer your question, James.
Mhm.
So we're gonna talk a little bit about the spin-offs
Mhm.
and what inspired you, what inspired the Rotoviz high stakes lockdown.
Yeah, the lowdown was one that we came up
Oh
with,
no.
gosh, however many years, that's probably like 10 years or so ago now. Rotoviz.com, one of our partners with the FFPC, and what those guys do is great, with all the models that they've built and everything that they have. Sean Siegel, Kevin Safraniak, Blair Andrews, everybody over there does awesome work. And they have a family of podcasts, and I don't know who came up with the idea. But it was, it's just like with anything, you're just bouncing ideas around. You kind of forget who comes up with it or whatever. But basically, that episode or that show, each episode is somebody I've had on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour before. But we go a little bit deeper into fantasy football game theory and strategy and stuff like that. Which is very on brand for what Rotoviz is, with everything that they do,
Yeah.
and everything that they've given fantasy football players over the years. And that was something that somebody came up with the idea. I said, hey, I could probably bring on some guests that I've had before. We can do a weekly show. And then Rotoviz said sure, and they put it within their podcast feed, and we broadcast it on our YouTube channel, and that was the first spinoff that we had of the HSFF Hour. Was something that we just, it's like if the HSFF Hour was Fantasy Football 101, the High Stakes Lowdown is sort of like Fantasy Football 201, just like kind of an extension of what we were already doing, but reaching a new audience through Rotoviz.
I love that. So they're talking a lot about, high stakes in the comment section, but I wanna ask you, especially that you have more than one podcast, Eric. How do you decide what deserves its own show, and what can you tell me about the 4+ shows that you have um, under your belt right now?
Yeah, I mean they're all kind of related, but they're all a little bit unique, right? The HSFF Hour, bringing on high stakes players that really don't have the voice or the amplification for their voice to have them come on every week. RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, kind of an extension of that, but we just go a little bit deeper. FFPC Insider Access is another show we started probably about 4 years ago with the Better Sports Network. And that was, or it is, a 2-hour show. But instead of having a player from the FFPC, we have somebody from the industry, like a content producer,
Yes.
that comes on and chops it up for 2 hours. So it's a little bit different view. Some of them play high stakes fantasy football, others don't, which is fine, because I think there's plenty of people who do not play high stakes that are just as knowledgeable, maybe even more so. And being able to pick their brain for 2 hours, especially when a lot of the people we have on that show are just writing articles and they're not podcasting, or they rarely podcast. This is an opportunity for people who've been fans of these writers and podcasters for years to have 120 minutes of unadulterated interaction with how they feel about whatever topic I bring up, whatever topics the audience brings up, whatever the guest wants to talk about. That's been really cool to have something like that, and exposing, again, maybe some younger writers, maybe less experienced writers, but definitely quality writers, quality podcasters, quality people who are doing good work that just haven't had the exposure yet. So bringing them on has been really cool. And then the other one, Extra Reps, is sort of just an extension of the HSFF hour, right? Where we go for an hour on Wednesday night. I'm notorious for building up show sheets that with way too much content that we can't get to. And so having this little extra bonus 30 to 40 minute show on Friday night to sort of like clean up everything we didn't get to, or maybe get into a little bit deeper that we just didn't have the time to on Wednesday nights, we can go ahead and do that and get that out there on Friday. So all of these are sort of, I mean, they're definitely all related, but they also have each individual, there's like a little bit more nuance to each one. And if you squint your eyes, you can see the differences between all four of them.
That's actually really good. I love that. You push yourself to a lot of directions into one direction, though. Um, so we were talking a lot about podcasting, but you did have a radio career as well. What was it like hosting the show with Leo and Balky?
Yeah, it was fun. We started off as a 2-hour mid-afternoon show in
Wow.
Northeast Wisconsin. So we talked a lot of Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, Marquette, whatever. And then we sort of retooled it, and for a year I did it just for an hour by myself because I just couldn't. I didn't have the time to do a 2-hour show anymore. And now I'm off terrestrial radio. I still do a fantasy football show with that radio station. Shout out 95.3, 99.1 FM, Appleton, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. The Score,
Nice.
WSDO. For anybody who's watching here who might listen to the last station, I still do a fantasy football show with them. But I'm out of the and I think, and this isn't a slight to the Score because they're awesome. Everybody there was fantastic. I just felt like talking about sports and talking, granted, with like experts, like we'd have Packers insiders and Brewers insiders and Badgers insiders come on and really talk about stuff that I or the average fan of those teams would not know about. It was cool to get in depth with that, but ultimately I did feel a little bit unfulfilled because I just felt like I was just talking about sports and wasn't making a difference for an hour or 2 hours.
Yeah.
But when it comes to fantasy football, we're offering actionable advice. We're telling people what we think what they should be doing or whatever, which I think is different. The radio was fun. It was cool. I think people still hold radio in high regard, as well they should. Being on the radio still comes with some cachet, right? Like,
Yes.
oh, hey, I was on the radio today, or oh my God, he does his own radio show or whatever. And ultimately, it's not that glamorous, but people kind of think it is. So it was very cool to do it. It was cool to execute something that I wanted to do when I was a kid, to actually do it in my adult life. I don't think I'd go back to it, but you never know. Maybe down the road, if the opportunity presented itself, I'd go back to that. But I'm glad where I am right now. But I'm also very glad that I took the plunge and had that, albeit brief radio career that lasted, a little bit under a decade or whatever. It was still fun, and I'm glad I did it.
I mean, it's a lesson you learn, from everything that you work in your life. But tell me, what's the funniest on-air moment you've ever had?
Oh man. That is a good question. Well, I can tell you that the first time I was ever on air was in college. And our college radio station was not just a campus wide feed. It went out to actual, like, you could listen to it wherever you were. It wasn't just something that was set up on campus. And I started in the summer. So this would have been like May or June. And I was supposed to be hosting or co-hosting a show, um, a sports talk show for an hour. And I was cool with it. I'd never been to the radio station before on campus. Like, I'd never been in the studio or whatever, the booth. I didn't really know how it worked. And then the guy who actually was one of my bosses at the radio station I just left, he was supposed to co-host with me. We went to college together, and I didn't even know him at the time. But he emailed me or he texted me and said something like, "Hey, I'm caught up at work. I can't make it. Can you run the show can you do the show tonight?" And I don't know if he assumed I knew how to do it. The director of radio services there, I don't know if he assumed I had worked up there before, but I didn't know what I was doing. And they just kind of, the director of radio services printed out a weather report for me. He's like, "Here you go. You're all set." And I kind of just ham and egged it. I said to him, I kind of played dumb a little bit, like, "Oh, it's been a little bit since I did this. Can you show me, like, what do I need to do to get on air? How do I start the show? How do I go to break or whatever?" And I picked it up. I mean, I was there like an hour before the show started. But that was the first time I was ever really on the radio, and I didn't know what
Wow.
I was doing, but I muddled my way through it and got done. Got through the show, no complaints, didn't screw anything up. And it was fun. It was it was kind of weird. It was wonky, but it was kind of exhilarating doing that, like projecting your voice and over, you don't know how many people are listening. And I always think that's interesting too, where, like, sometimes in real life situations, I have social anxiety or whatever, but if you put a microphone, like what we're doing right now, you put a microphone in front of me, I don't know who's listening or watching or whatever.
That's
And
so
it's
true.
very easy for me to talk. And I think that it's always been the case for me too, which is probably how I got through that. I don't
I
really
love
remember
it.
any other nefarious incidents over the years that were really bad. But that first time I was on, that was a trip, definitely.
I wasn't expecting that, but I do like where you went with this, Eric.
No,
Um,
no.
so live and learn, live and learn. That's
Yeah.
lovely. Um, I want you to take me to when you first started fantasy football, and take me back to that moment, and take me back to when you first won the 135 grand prize.
Yeah, that was so I started playing in the mid 90s. Ironically, I got a computer game um just to play. I was like a computer football game. And in the instructions for this game on how to play this game, there is this thing called fantasy football, like rules for fantasy football in the back. I'm like, "Oh, this is kind of cool. You can, like, draft your own teams, and how they do in real life is how your team does. This sounds like fun." So I got it. I think the first league I was ever in was like with 3 or 4 friends. Like, it was like a 4-team league, which is like nothing nowadays. Um,
Yeah.
but that was the first league I was ever in, and I'm like, "This is really fun. I really like this." And at the time I started playing, I had been a suffering Packers fan, where they were so bad in the 1980s, and then just as they were starting to get good, I started playing fantasy football, where all the games mattered. Then, like, watching all these NFL games, these really good teams with these really good players. Now all of a sudden I had a connection to these players. I'm like, "This is awesome. Like, I got to keep doing this." And then, draft day was always so much fun, and obviously winning is always fun. Like,
Of
that
course.
was cool as well. So I don't know. It was just after that, I'm like, I can't imagine a season, not doing this. So I kept going. And then back in 2008, I think it was, I co-owned a team with two other of my friends, and we ended up winning the grand prize is $100,000, but with all the other ancillary stuff that we had won, it totaled up to right around like 130, $135,000.
Wow.
I was not, we did not split that three ways. I was not invested, one third, one third, one third on that, but it was a really nice chunk of change that I got from fantasy football that year. And normally, the way that we had won it, it's like the last 3 weeks of the season, you're kind of adding on to a full total, right?
Yes.
And obviously, the leaderboard changes week to week on that. It didn't that year. Our team was just, it was a good team, but it just absolutely wrecked everyone. Like everybody we had on that team went crazy every single week. And we were leading the contest all 3 weeks, and then we ended up winning the whole thing. So we're in first place all the way through, which never happens. I mean, so it was crazy. And then when we actually won, I mean, I'm still trying to find that feeling again because I haven't experienced it since then. But
That's wild.
I just remember being surreal, when it actually happened. But because it wasn't like this buzzer beating last second thing, like we were winning the whole time. I had 3 weeks to sort of get used to the idea of winning a 6-figure grand prize. And so when it actually happened, it was a little, I don't want to say anticlimactic, but it kind of was a little bit. But the celebration was fun, a lot of parties, and it was great. And
I
I
bet.
know I've had a lot of people on the show who have won, $500,000 or $1 million bucks, playing, and hearing those stories, every January or December whenever we have them on when they're winning these prizes. That always takes me back, and it's always fun hearing everybody else's story of how they hit it big in fantasy football.
Agreed. We have a question from Doug Orth. So he wants, what made you ultimately decide to ditch the razor and go full blown beard?
I don't know if it was ever a decision I made. This was, I think, the last time I was clean shaven, I think, was August of 2022. So it's been
Woo!
like 3.5 years or so that this has been growing out. And I don't know. I feel like I just let it grow, let it grow, let it grow. And then, ultimately I'd shave it. And then I started getting comments, YouTube comments on when I talk about shaving the beard. And a bunch of people are like, no, you can't shave the beard. Don't shave the beard. Like it's, you got to keep it. It's part of you. It's part of the show or whatever. And so it wasn't a decision I necessarily made. It was sort of a decision that a lot of the audience members for my shows made, where they're like, no, we want you to keep it. We want you to, to keep wearing the beard for the shows. Ultimately, I will shave it off at some point. I've been talking about shaving it off for like 2 years now. And it's going to happen at some point. I just don't know when. But for right now, Doug, yes, I have made the decision. The beard will continue to grow for the foreseeable future.
I feel like that is your wife asking you what you gotta do with your with your beard at this point.
She is
Go
not a
away,
fan of
Doug.
it. She is not a fan
She's
of it.
not?
I don't know. She does not like it,
Oh.
but I think she's come around and she's used to it at this point.
So maybe before you're going to the expo, are you going this year?
No, that's the other thing is I'd love to go to the expo, but we are so slammed. I commission a lot of our online drafts. And so
Yes,
for me to go to the expo, I'd be in my hotel room the whole time commissioning drafts, which wouldn't be fun at all. But I'd love to go. I've heard nothing but great stuff about the Fantasy Football Expo. Bob Lung, who sort of came up with the creation for this, I've had him on several of my shows over the years. And he's always said, you got to go, you got to go. And I said, one of these years I will go. It's just with how crazy FFPC gets in August.
yes.
I think it's a little bit earlier. I think it might be in late July this year. With how
This
crazy
year,
we get
yes.
that time, yeah, with how crazy we are at that time of year, like that's right around when Pros versus Joes is going on, and which is another
True.
cool event that FFPC does. At some point, I will get out there. It's just I don't know if it's going to be this year, but I loved it. And the thing is, a lot of the people I've had on the shows over the years, they go to it every year, so it'd be cool to
Yes.
actually meet them in person instead of just virtually.
I would love to see you there one time.
Yeah.
I would really love to. Is your wife into fantasy football as well? And does she like going with you places with
She
fantasy football?
she is not into fantasy football. She is not into football at all. Like
At all?
no, she is out on that. She's talked about I have to go to Las Vegas every year for about a week or so for FFPC for our live events that we put
Yes,
on out there. And she said, well, maybe I could go out there with you sometime. And I said, honey, that's fine. Come on out. But remember, for like out of those 8 days I'm out there, I'm working for like 6.5 of them. So I don't know how much time I'd be able to spend with you. I mean, like FFPC is, I have basically 2 full-time jobs. So it's difficult for me to like spend a lot of time with her, but we try to make time for her and or I try to make time for her and the kids,
of course.
and making sure that we go on vacations when we can, or wherever we go, whatever we're doing, I can I'm still able to bring a computer along and be able to work at least part of the time, so that I can still be able to be present for them and hang out and be a father and a husband at the same time. It gets difficult, especially late in the
Agreed.
summer. But we've made it work now for almost 20 years, as far as the fantasy gig goes. So I think we found a good routine.
That's awesome. So that leads me perfectly into the next question. Does your kids play or want to play fantasy football as well?
Yeah, my daughter does not. My daughter is 10. She is only interested in the Chiefs because of Travis Kelce. She does not. Yeah, I know you're a Chiefs fan too. I know you're a big Chiefs fan.
I
She
love your daughter.
Yes, she 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 does not really watch the games, but she roots for the Chiefs, what have you. My son
Right.
has been in a fantasy football league with his buddies. My son's 12 years old. He's been in a fantasy football league with his buddies the last 2 years. I think he's into it. I think he's just he just likes playing with his friends and like doing. He's done well in the league. But I don't think I don't think it's really grabbed him the way that it's
Got
grabbed
it.
me. Now, maybe when he gets older, because obviously it wasn't until my 20s when I was really, really into fantasy football. Maybe in like 10 years, he'll definitely be down for it. But right now he's not. This is my daughter, by the way, which
Hi.
she should
I'm a
not be
Chiefs
coming
fan
in right now.
too.
Yeah, no, Emma's the
See?
Chiefs.
No, Dad.
She's the Chiefs fan I was talking about. What do you want, honey? I'm in the middle of the show.
Mom was watching it, and I heard my name.
Okay, there you go. Well, I will see you in a little bit. Okay.
Hi.
All right. That's
I love her.
She's made a routine of ambushing shows that
I
I've done.
love it though.
Yeah, this is not her first time on YouTube for sure.
Let's go. I love that. So, Eric, I want to talk a little bit about interviewing legends and writing story, like writing and storytelling and stuff like that, because you are so big into this stuff. What was like to interview Chris Shiflett from
Yeah.
Foo Fighters
That was
for you?
cool. That was a really cool. That was something that I was hanging around the radio station on a Saturday morning, which I don't normally do. And Foo Fighters were actually in Madison that day, Madison, Wisconsin. And we found out through, I don't know if it's through their publicist, but that they were Chris Shiflett was looking to get the word out about this this protest that they were doing, or this it was something to do with, and it's been so many years now, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something to do with pirating music and being taken advantage of, or something to that effect. So we got a chance for him to come on and talk about why it was important for him to have artists, not only them, but other maybe struggling artists that were not as financially successful as Foo Fighters, to show how they were being taken advantage of and how it wasn't fair what was being done to them. So we had him come on our radio station. It was myself and one of my colleagues who interviewed him. We probably talked to him for like 15, 20 minutes or whatever. And it's always difficult when you're interviewing somebody like that, because you have two different agendas, right? His agenda is he wants to create awareness of what they're doing and how artists, like he was before he hit it big, are being exploited. Whereas we want to talk about, hey, what's it like, hanging out with Dave Grohl and Taylor Hawkins, touring, 200 days a year or whatever it is, and tell us some of the behind the scenes stuff from the Foo Fighters. So that's always like a give and take type of thing. He gave us some good stuff, and we brought attention to the awareness that he was trying to create as well
Right.
as I can't even remember exactly what it was now at this point. So I don't know how much we did, but no, it was a lot of fun. It was cool. It's one of those things in the moment, and I get starstruck so easily. It's one of those things in the moment you just kind of clear your head and just remember you're talking to another human being, and hey, just have a conversation with him, because and ask him stuff you're wondering, because chances are if you're wondering it, there's a lot of other people that are probably wondering the answer to
True.
that question as well. So, and it went by, I mean, like I said, it was like 15-20 minutes. It felt like it was about 30 seconds. It went by like that, but
Wow.
that was very, very cool, to interview him. And obviously Foo Fighters have only gotten bigger since then.
Yeah. So I know that you interviewed a couple more people. I'm gonna say their names: Matt Kenseth,
Mhm.
Christian Latner, and David Taylor. What was
Yeah.
it like interviewing big names like that? And which interview challenged you the most?
Um, Probably the Matt Kenseth interview. Matt Kenseth is from Wisconsin. He was a NASCAR Cup Series champion, and he was, by the time I interviewed him, he was retired, but he had come back. He was driving a pace car for a racetrack that was a local racetrack from where I was located in Northeast Wisconsin, and he was sort of like an honorary, I don't know what you call it, honorary MC or whatever it was that weekend. And so we were going to interview him. He couldn't do the show. He couldn't do the interview during the show. So I had to pre-record it. And it was getting closer and closer to the start of the show. And he still hadn't, you're kind of at the mercy of whenever he calls in, because
True.
we don't have his number. We can't, and he's doing all this other press. So we have to kind of like wait for him. And so it was getting closer and closer to the start of my show. And I was like, we're gonna have to scrap this interview. I'm not gonna have time. And then about 4 minutes before we went on air, he called in, and I had my co-host kind of handle the show while I interviewed Matt Kenseth, who, wasn't in the greatest of moods. He was probably sick of talking to people at that point. I'm sure I was like the 18,000th person he talked to that day. And I probably asked him a lot of the same questions he had already answered. So it was all that,
Crazy.
that was a little challenging to try to not only make him sound pleasant, but put him in a good mood, but make him have a good time, a fun time as well. That was
Agree.
probably the most challenging one. I think it turned out okay. The Christian Leitner one was really cool because this guy, I mean, anybody who knows college basketball in the 90s, Christian Leitner was the guy from Duke, right?
Yes.
Most people hated him. I think he liked that. But if you were a Duke fan, you loved him. And then he was the collegiate player that got chosen to play on the original Dream Team at the 1992 Barcelona Olympics with Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Karl Malone, David Robinson, everybody who was on that team. He was the collegiate guy so we talked to him about that. He was big into muskie fishing, which is huge in Wisconsin. So we got him talking about that, as well as his NBA career. So that was kind of surreal too. And then David Taylor, the interview with him, where he wasn't an Olympic champion yet. He was a world champion, but he never won an Olympic gold medal before. We got a chance to talk to him on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour because, lo and behold, we found out that he played FFPC. We didn't even know this. So I asked him, I emailed him, I say, hey, we do this show. Would you ever want to do this show? We'll talk about wrestling. We'll talk about fantasy football. He said, yeah, I'd love to. So he came on and did the show, very knowledgeable guy. And then I think it was about a month and a half after, maybe a month after he did that show with us, he won a gold medal for freestyle wrestling at the
Wow.
Olympics, which was pretty cool. So yeah, all
That's
three of them
crazy.
fun in different ways.
Okay, so now I need to say this, Eric. Now that you are met with a lot of celebrities, I feel that you are one and you have to come to the expo so I can see you and I can say to people, I have a celebrity
Nice.
next to me.
I
So
you
that's
you will
amazing. That's
you will be
crazy.
you will be the first person I seek out when I get to the expo, Carla, for sure. And yes, in fact, I'll even sign an autograph for you, so then it'll make me look even more important than I
Oh
actually
my
am.
God.
Which,
You
yeah,
are important. That's such an honor if I have your autograph. Like,
right.
seriously. Eric, we're gonna talk more about the writing, which when I was reading your bio, it stopped me there because I want to ask what inspired your essay on Seinfeld.
Yeah, this is a college project that I did. I can't remember what class it was for. It was one of my radio TV film classes, and we basically had to do a deep dive in into a subject to write about extensively. And I chose because I'm a big Seinfeld fan. I wanted to talk about how the television show Seinfeld sort of like turned primetime television and changed sitcoms. The ascent, like when did that happen? How did that happen? What were the factors that made it happen? Because Seinfeld was not a big, I mean, like season one, uh, they didn't know if they were going to
Wasn't
make it. Season two was a little bit better, but it was sort of like season three, season four that it really became part of popular culture, and
true.
it became, I mean, it was truly the first must-see TV show, and I was fascinated by that. And we see it with other sitcoms now too today, where they kind of struggle to find their footing. And eventually, if they're really, really good, it seems like that season three, season four seems to be where the flip is switched or the switch is flipped at that point. And I wanted to delve deep into what led into Seinfeld. So that was sort of the project I worked on, and handed it in. My professor said, there's this peer-reviewed journal that comes out twice a year called the Oshkosh Scholar. We think that if you went a little bit more in depth on this, it's got a good shot of being published in that. And so I did. I worked on it a little bit more. It was like a semester's worth of research and everything that went into it. It's still the longest thing I've ever written. I don't even know how many pages it was, but it was definitely in the 30s. And it got published in Oshkosh Scholar.
Wow.
I don't know. They had a digital version too. So it was online for many, many years. I don't know if you can find that online anymore because it's probably been about 15 years. And this is a journal that comes out, twice a year. So I don't know if you can find it on there anymore, but that was frustrating at times to write. I think when you have that, bunch, that wide sweeping amount of information, it's difficult. Well, how do you put this all together? What's the best way? Because at that point you're not really trying to entertain anymore. this is
No.
this is a peer-reviewed scholarly essay that you're writing, so you're writing sort of like for a different audience, for a different purpose, and then putting that all together was a challenge. But you know with the success that I had with that and the feedback I got, it was really rewarding and fulfilling to churn something like that out. And it was a lot of fun.
That's such an amazing thing to do. Do you think someone from Seinfeld like read it? They
No,
gave you some comments about it or something like that?
that
Because
would
when
have
something like that
that,
is published,
yeah,
you never
that would
know.
have been awesome. But I would be shocked if any of them ever read it. Like the two guys that I would really care about reading that would have been Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David, the
Yes,
co-creators of Seinfeld. And I have a feeling, watching interviews and reading interviews that they've had over the years, they'd kind of just, they would not pay any attention to it. They'd just say it's a bunch of hooey. We got lucky. We're not geniuses. This was our lives. We just put it out there. I'm sure they'd appreciate the work that went into it, but I don't think they'd put much stock into the actual, because they lived it, right? They didn't need
true.
to they didn't need to read about it. They lived it. They knew what went on.
That's such an amazing thing to write, though. I love that, and I love that it's published. I hope you can find it. I really want to read it. If you can find it for me, please send it to me. I wanna read that. I love this stuff. Let's talk a little bit about football, especially that's coming soon. And what can you tell people, especially that this year it has been really tough for a lot of players. A lot of players got hurt. I've heard a lot of people didn't win where they supposed to be winning. We've seen two teams at the end of the football season that nobody even said they're gonna make it, and it was really shocking to a lot of players like you, a lot of podcasters, and how do you work with strategies and with stuff like that when everything else fails?
I think you just have to learn to accept that football is a violent game played with a funny shaped ball that takes weird bounces. And no matter how much preparation and research and homework you can put into, you're never going to be able to handle everything that the game throws at you. There are a lot of people in the industry that speak in absolutes, podcasters, writers, or whatever. Hey, this is how it is. This is what's going to happen, and that's it. And JJ Zacharyson, who I think is one of the brightest minds in the industry from late round, he refuses, and I think this is something I try to do too. I don't know if I do it as successfully as he does, but he doesn't speak in absolutes. He speaks in range of outcomes, which is the way you have to play fantasy football. You can't play assuming that X is going to happen, Y is going to stay healthy, and Z is going to break out, or something like that, or W is going to get hurt, or something like that.
I agree.
Weird things happen, stuff that we can't. No, like to your point, Carla, nobody predicted a Seahawks Patriots Super Bowl before the start of the season. You think about all the injuries that happen. You can have the best team ever, but if it falls apart because of injuries, I mean, that's fantasy football. It is what it is. So, and I think the seasoned, especially high stakes player, they don't get tilted with that kind of stuff anymore. They understand, like, hey, it was a dream season. I had it till I didn't have it, and so be it. Life goes on. Like, you really got to have the perfect mix. The best team doesn't always win, right? It's the team that gets hottest and stays healthiest at the right time wins the $1 million in the FFPC. And does that not mirror real life? I mean, there's a lot of people that don't believe the Seahawks were the best team in pro football last year, but they stayed healthy. They got hot at the right time, and they won the games that they needed to win the whole thing, and they're champions. So I think in that regard, the people who've been doing it long enough, I don't think at least I don't get upset about it anymore. It's just one of those things. And it really makes you appreciate when your team does get together and stays healthy and crushes it those final few weeks of the season when all the cash is doled out, all the prizes are won, all the championships are awarded. I think it makes you appreciate when that stuff does come together for you. It's really special, and you always want to remember it because it is rare to win something like that.
I agree. What's in your opinion the most underrated strategy?
Underrated strategy. I think that the zero RB strategy has been pretty polarizing in the fantasy football industry over the last 10, 15 years or whatever. It's weird because it's weird to think it's been around that long, but it has, maybe even longer. And I think when it comes down to it, I think zero RB can work when you're not taking a running back till round 6 or round 7 or whatever, and you're loading up on receivers and tight ends in your first few rounds. I think that can work. I think the underrated, well, maybe not underrated, but I think that the thing that I've seen most successful drafters do, and I've talked to high stakes players about this, they'll tell me, what they'd like to do and the players that they like and who they want to take at certain spots. And then the draft starts, things go totally different than what they thought. And you see them doing things that they said they weren't going to do. Pros versus Joes, and we cover those drafts all the time. We'll have people come on in the midst of their draft, and I'll say, what the heck are you doing? I thought you liked this guy. I thought you'd never start off with 3 running backs. And it's kind of a shrug, like, hey, you got to flow with how the draft's going. And I think the best high stakes players do exactly that, where they don't come in with a set way of, hey, I'm going to draft my team this way. I'm going to have this many running backs by the end of this round. I'm going to have this many receivers by the end of this round. I think the people that are like, as Bruce Lee would say, the people who are like water that just, kind of formulate, go with the flow of the draft and scoop up value where they can and build these teams, with maximum upside. I think those are the people that are the most successful. So perhaps the most underrated strategy, Carla, is not having a strategy. It is going in and just being able to adapt to what the teams around you are doing. And I think, and that takes a lot of practice, obviously, because you don't want to get into a draft and not get the players that you wanted or whatever. But sometimes you got to make sacrifices depending upon how it's going. But the people that can adapt to that, I think are the best players out there.
Agreed. Eric, it has been an almost an hour for the show, but I still have a couple questions to ask you because you're such an interesting person, and I want to know more. What's Who's the person behind the fantasy football? And this is part of what I do every single Wednesday. Tell me, what's the biggest reward that you've had so far in life?
Oh, biggest reward I've had, like just with fantasy football.
Anything, even in life itself, maybe family,
Yeah,
whatever you want to share.
yeah, I would say health and family, not necessarily in that order, but I'm
Yes,
very fortunate and blessed to have a wife who puts up with an incredible amount of what she doesn't always believe is work. With me,
yes,
getting involved with fantasy football, watching sports, watching football, whatever. Uh, she's been very accommodating over the years, so very blessed with that. And then two great kids who I love very much, who are um, people I've learned a lot from over the years, and that they continue to teach me every day. And then and being fortunate enough to be healthy, like with I haven't had any like serious issues that have because I think if I were to get sick or something would happen to me, that would really suck. Not being able to do podcasts or not being able to do my two jobs right now. I just get rewarded by just putting in a solid day's effort into being the best, podcaster or, um, um, employee or whatever you want to say, best father, best husband. I think like, that's reward in and of itself is just having the life that I have, being able to lead the life that I have, doing something I really enjoy,
I love
um,
it.
for a living. I think that's just being where I'm at now. I'm 46 years old, and I never really would have thought I would be in this position. But financially healthy, physically healthy, have a great family, great group of friends, great group of people I work with. I mean that is really a blessing and probably the best reward I think any of us can say, really.
Agreed. Agree. I love that. Eric, what keeps you hungry? What keeps you hungry for success? What keeps you hungry for doing more?
Um, I think expectations from the audiences that I have, it keeps me humble, and it keeps me wanting to always do better, right? No
Yes,
matter how good you think, no matter how much you think you're dialed into to what you're doing, you can always be doing more. You can always be doing better. I think in this industry too, with podcasting, there's not really like a pinnacle, you can get to, because whatever ceiling you break through, there's always another one to break through that, right? Like you'll never be the biggest, you'll never be the best. So I think chasing that, not saying I'm great or anything, but chasing greatness, I think is a motivation, right? um
agreed. Yes,
and and I think just learning, just a hunger to learn, a hunger to be better, a hunger to know more, to be more experienced, to just really be better in every sense of it. I think that's important, and equally important, or probably more important, is helping the audience be better, helping them be more knowledgeable, helping, because that's what keeps them coming back. And when they keep coming back, then I want to just keep creating more content and for them, that I know people are enjoying it, that are coming to watch, coming to listen, and it's helping them out, like that they're winning leagues because of it. Hey, that's cool, and that's what really keeps me going.
I love that, Eric. This is really amazing because we all strive for success and we strive for greatness, and that's part of our career and where we want to be. Um, so tell me, what's next for you? What's next for your shows, your career, you, the person, Eric?
Um, People always ask me that too. Like, oh, well, like, not people always ask me that, but people have asked me, oh, what's your 5-year plan, 10-year plan, or whatever. I don't have
Yeah,
one. And I think part of the reason I don't have
that's
one
okay.
is because I'm loving what I'm doing right now. That I just want this moment to last as long as possible.
Wanna live
So
it.
so I like 10 years from now, Carla, I still want to be doing this. 20 years from now, I still want to be doing this. If somebody allows me a microphone and a camera in my 70s, yeah, I want to still be doing this, because ultimately, it can be grueling after a while and it can be a grind, but it's so rewarding and it's so much fun. So what's next? Hopefully more of this. I'd love to have my movie podcast take off a little bit off topic with Ben and Balky, anywhere you get podcasts. I say it's a movie podcast, but it's more like a pop culture thing. And that's sort of that's been a lot of fun too. I don't think I could ever do that and hit it big with it, but it is fun. And it's a nice departure from talking fantasy football all the time. But ultimately, getting my kids through college and hanging it up and hanging out with my wife for the rest of my
Nice.
life. That's probably what it's going to be all about. But until then, hopefully, doing this for another 15, 20, 25 years, that'd be pretty awesome if I could do that.
You're so good at it. So I do believe I'm serious. Like you're so good. You have the voice, you have the presence. So I really wish you well for that as well, Eric. Before we end up the show, I do have one more question to ask you, and I do ask every single one of my guests who comes to the show this specific question. So I want you to tell me something, a secret maybe, or something that you did at a really young age, but you never spoke of before that you want to share tonight on the show.
Oh man, what can I think of here? That nobody knows, that only I know.
Yeah.
Boy, what would that be? God, that's a great question. Honestly, it's weird. What's coming to mind was this is so stupid. But I remember it like it was yesterday because I felt so awful about it. I was in kindergarten and we were sitting at these tables that formed sort of a U, like a U shape. And
Yes.
I was sitting at one of them, and I was this girl next to me. Her name was Melanie. I remember that. She was sitting next to me. She had her hand on the table, and I noticed there was a crack between the tables where we were sitting. And I don't like that. I gotta have them together. So, like scissors could fall through there, paper could fall through there.
Yes.
So I kind of just pushed the legs together. But what I didn't realize was her finger was on one of the cracks between the tables. So when I pushed the tables together, I didn't notice that, and I pinched her finger. And she looked at me and she said, "Ow!" And I'm like, I felt awful. I'm like, and I just kind of said sorry, and then immediately, because I'm like, I've never been in trouble for him. 5 years old, 6 years old, or whatever it was. She's like, oh, she's gonna tell the teacher. This is gonna be awful. I'm in so much trouble, and she never did. And I think
Wow.
that just stayed. I don't think anybody else noticed. It was just me and her. And I had a good relationship with her after that. She switched schools after a few years, but I don't think it was because of the finger pinching incident. But that's something that I've never told anybody about before. That's something me and Melanie just shared. And I'm sure if you talk to her, she wouldn't even remember it. But I just felt awful about that.
Oh my God.
The fact that I can remember this 4 decades later tells you I just felt terrible about that. So there you go. That's something that I didn't think I was ever going to relive, but I relived it tonight here with you, Carla.
Ouch, Eric. I love this story. Thank you so much for sharing
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Eric, before we wrap up, I want you to go ahead and share where people can connect with you and follow your work, social media or YouTube or anywhere that you want them to follow.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do right now, and I'll put it up on the screen for
Yes.
anybody who wants to check out where you can find my work. I'm going to put this up, and you can throw it up on the screen. My X handle. Oh, no, it's not. It's failing to post. So I'll just put this up. My X handle is at. I think maybe I could put that up at least. Is at Eric Balkman. Oh, it's right on the screen. It's right under my
Yes.
face. I'm an idiot. Yeah. So that's
No, you're not.
everything I do, I post on there. So High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, which we're going live in about 14 minutes for, that will be on there. Rotoviz High Stakes Lowdown, that's going to be on there. The Extra Rep Show on Friday night, that'll be on there. FFPC Insider Access. So you'll always have a link to what I'm doing there. And then if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, I do all the shows on youtube.com/FFPC Fantasy, youtube.com/FFPC Fantasy. Hit the notification bell. And then you'll be subscribed. You'll never miss any of the shows we do on there. And it's not just me. We have a wide variety of people that do a lot of shows on there that are really, really good. It's a cool community we built at FFPC, myffpc.com, if I can get that plug in there. If you're looking to take that tiny step to high stakes fantasy football, you can join FFPC there. You send emails to the support email address. I might even be the one answering them. You never know. But x.com/Eric Balkman is where to follow me on social media. I really am not too active on Facebook and Instagram, but X I am.
So James is saying that your Twitter account picture will surprise us.
Yeah, it's me clean shaven.
No beard.
Yeah, no beard. That was probably a photo from like 5-6 years ago. But yeah, there's plenty of people that see that. Plenty of people I have on the show. And then they see that, and then they see me on the show, like, wow, you look totally different than what I had thought. But yeah,
I love it, Eric. I love every single second we had together tonight. Thank you so much for showing up and for talking to me. I really appreciate your time.
my pleasure, Carla. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in for this episode of The Game Changers. If tonight's conversation shifted your perspective on fantasy football or the game of life, drop your biggest takeaway in the comment. I read every single one. Join me next Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time with Beerly Fantasy for another game-changing conversation. Big love to JC for his behind-the-scene magic and to the Powerhouse, a team at TSA for fueling this mission. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, tap the bell, leave a review, and follow us across social media. Until next time, keep challenging the game and making your mark. This is Carla signing off with Eric. Have a great evening, everybody. Bye.